Hi, folks. My friends from Denmark are on Global Music Match Spotlight for the next 10 days. And I'm thrilled to introduce their band called En to One in Danish and translated as One on One. So Thomas plays guitar and Carla plays a really fantastic musical instrument called Nyckelharpa in Danish. And together they play contemporary interpretations of Nordic folk tunes that originally come from Sweden. So let's hear Thomas talk about the music and instrument and its historical context and sound.
And the guitar actually has been something that's been introduced to the Swedish music quite recently. They actually took some inspirations from Greek music because they introduced, string-based instruments like the bouzouki, and they made like a Swedish bouzouki. It's called a sitar, also kind of like what you see in a lot of Welsh music and Scottish music and stuff like that. So guitar in Swedish music and Danish music is folk music is actually quite new. But it really makes sense because it's a great instrument for accompanying. I can play melodies, I can play chords, I can act as a bass player, I can act as a drummer. So it has a lot of possibilities. So in that sense, it makes really good sense. But traditionally, like the instruments in Swedish music and Danish music has been very violin based. So a lot of violins. Usually if you go a couple of 100 years back and go to a party in a barn, there will be like an army of violinists just, playing along. But then we also have these a bit stranger instruments, and the Nyckelharpa, Nyckelharpa in Danish, or Nyckelharpa in Swedish, is one of those instruments. And it's a very old instrument. Like the core of the instrument is very old. It dates back to, I think, the Renaissance and the period of around the Renaissance and Baroque periods. Of course, there's happened a lot with the instrument since that, because when it came out, the original instruments that you know of are much more scaled. So you're only able to play a certain scale. So they are not chromatic. But the Swedish, in particular, has been very good at incorporating the Nyckelharpa into their folk music, and they are mostly responsible for it to survive as an instrument to this day. So there's been some efforts in Sweden to keep it alive, and some pioneers has been keeping the tradition, not only playing tradition but also the building tradition alive. And you will see a lot of the modern Nyckelharpas. They are built by the same people who played. So the good builders also, some of the best players. So it's kind of interesting. I heard one guy say at some point, I think it was in the middle of the 1900s, there were like 10 Nyckelharpa players left in the world. So there was actually a downwards spiral, and then there was this initiative to keep it alive. And then suddenly people started to playing it again, and developing repertoire, and so the instrument and the tradition was saved on a flinch, so to speak. If I have to turn, very briefly to explain the instrument, it's kind of, if you take a piano and you take a violin and you mix them together, you get the Nyckelharpa. I can kind of show you one second. So I don't know if you can see, but there is 4 strings that are slightly thicker than the other strings. Mm-hmm. Those are the strings that she actually hits with her bow. The rest of the strings are what we call sympathetic strings. Right. And you probably know stuff like that from the traditions that you know. So you have like resonant strings that will actually, in practice, it will give a reverb effect to the instrument. So on my guitar, I have to have a foot pedal that gives me reverb, but this instrument has reverb built into it acoustically. So that gives it this very special timbre. And then you have the Nyckels, the keys. It's the direct translation into English is keyed fiddle, Nyckelharpa, keyed harp actually. So she has these buttons that she presses, and that works exactly when I put my finger, just like when I put my finger on the fretboard to alter the tone. So it's a kind of a combination of a a piano technique and violin technique. But Karina has been playing violin for many years before she started playing the Nyckelharpa. So of course that also helps in the technique as well. But she's played Nyckelharpa for only 4 years, so she's quite new on the instrument actually.
This was really amazing. And I'm thrilled to share with you that Into One has recently released their EP. So check them out, and I encourage you to follow them on their socials because I promise you that it will uplift your day. So I'll be back with more about the music and an interesting collaboration that we are working on. So for now, have a great weekend and stay tuned.